Hello, and welcome to the latest installment of Law & Order, the video series where I look at and unpack stories from games. In this one, we'll be looking at the story from the latest game in the Silent Hill franchise, and that is Silent Hill F. Silent Hill F set a new precedent in the series by having it set outside of the US, even though Silent Hill: The Short Message was set in Germany, but that wasn't really a full game, with this one being set in Japan during the 1960s. So what did I think of this game? Setting-wise and in terms of music and atmosphere, the game was absolutely phenomenal. The story was pretty good, had great replay value in that the narrative changed slightly on subsequent playthroughs, with events becoming clearer after each one. But the combat was so poor, in my opinion. There was just too much to keep track of, lots of weapons to choose from, and these weapons would have a durability gauge. This was remedied by toolkits to restore the weapon. There was a focus meter so you could do more damage and read attacks better, and whilst it took a while to charge, it was upgradable in order to charge faster. This is in stark contrast to titles like Silent Hill 1 and 2, where a steel pipe was just that, a steel pipe, which didn't have durability and didn't break on you in the middle of an encounter. There is a dodge mechanic which is way too overpowered, as Hinako jumps, or rather teleports 6 feet away, and this particular enemy, coupled with the tedious combat, was an absolute slog. Despite that, I enjoyed the narrative experience that this game gave us, and I do appreciate the direction the series is going in. A lot of OG fans will say that it doesn't feel like a Silent Hill game, and whilst I do think those people are right, perhaps that's not a bad thing. The series needs something different, in the same way Resident Evil needed Resident Evil 7. A lot of OG Resident Evil fans didn't like that either, but the series is alive and well, and it's something that I hope for the Silent Hill franchise too. Anyway, that's quite a long introduction, but thanks for listening anyway. I'm here to talk about the story though. Before we dive in, thanks to Konami for sending me a code for this game. This video, like other videos in this series, will be structured in that I'll give a basic explanation of the plot, and then unpack and deep dive into various parts of the story afterwards. Let's begin. It's the year 1962 in the small rural town of Ebisugaoka in the Japanese mountains. At the top of the mountain rides the Shimizu family. The youngest daughter, Hinako, is sat outside the house and speaks with her older sister, Junko. She thanks Junko for always looking out for her, and she gives her a small bell as a gift. At some point later on, the father, Kanto, is shouting loudly about how Hinako is going to stop speaking back to her parents and that she should be more like her sister. Hinako leaves the house with her father shouting as he's been drinking, and makes her way down the hill towards the town to meet with her friends. Walking through it though, the town appears to be completely deserted. She also sees a carcass on the ground, dead and very bloody, which freaks her out. By her friend Sakuko's house, she addresses Hinako as a traitor, but says that she'll meet her by the town store shortly. There, Hinako meets with her longtime childhood best friend, Shu. He hands her some pills that help Hinako with her headaches, and eventually their other friend, Rinko, shows up along with Sakuko. Whilst the group are throwing banter amongst one another, Hinako spots something. A thick fog approaches, and a figure appears to exist within it. Sakuko once again calls Hinako a traitor, and she is stopped mid-sentence and just dies. A pretty horrific death too. Panicked, the group then flee from the fog monster while strange floral growths spread through the town, and eventually Hinako, trapped at a dead end, is saved by her sister Junko as she throws down a ladder and Hinako manages to escape the monster. But there's actually no sign of her sister anywhere. Injured and stressed out from their headaches, Hinako takes the red capsules that Shu gave her, and these help. Pushing on, she is confronted with a horrific sight, and this is what appears to be a doll, made up from lumps of flesh stitched together which tries to attack her. Avoiding or fighting more of them, Hinako eventually circles back around and makes it back to the store, and outside she finds Sakuko's dead body covered by the floral growths. Moving her body into the store and covering her up after defeating more monsters, Hinako's head starts to hurt and she passes out. She then wakes up in a place known as the Dark Shrine, hearing a voice asking her if she's alright and that she should rest if she needs to. Something happens to her again and she steps outside of the Grand Hall, being greeted by a man who is known as Fox Mask. Handing her a lantern, she follows him, and from notes and scratched messages on the rocks here, other people came through this place too. Approaching a shrine, it seems she needs a key, so heading across the area and having to deal with another terrifying monster, she manages to find one that Fox Mask had made himself. Taking it though, a red mist appears and fills the area, and Hinako has to make a run for the shrine whilst being pursued by monsters. She unlocks the door and heads inside, but upon attempting to close the door and a monster running at it, she is knocked out again. She comes to back in the town again and Shu is there, holding her. He's relieved that she's okay, as is Hinako relieved that Shu is alive. Both he and Hinako agree that they should try and find Rinko, and they head towards her house. On the way, they both talk about how they used to play a game called Space Wars, when they were kids, even to this day, calling each other partner. They also debate whether this is actually a dream or reality. Shu pinches himself and tells Hinako it's real. Hinako finds disgusting growths blocking a path, and Shu tells her to go round via a house. She does so, but trying to grab the key to the shed, she's attacked by a very large monster. This one wields a huge knife, and avoiding it or taking it down, she's able to retrieve the key from the well's bucket and passes through the shed, meeting up with Shu again. Shu says that Junko asked him to keep Hinako safe, and they move on. Crossing a field where they used to play together as kids, Shu disappears and Hinako is left there surrounded by a thick fog which seems to be trapping her there. Also there with her are creepy scarecrows that resemble young teenagers. On the hay bale there, Hinako spots the doll she used to play with as a child. Managing to find her way out of the field, Hinako has somehow now arrived at Rinko's house with Shu. She comes outside and her relation at Shu coming to save her turns to her disappointment when she sees Hinako there too. She says that everyone is gone, even her grandmother who can barely walk. Inside the house, they agree that it's not safe for them to stay there and that they should try and get help. Rinko says that they're trapped there and there's no way out as the bridge is damaged. Shu says they can take the mountain behind his house and that he knows a good shortcut through the wasabi fields, but that they should take some medicine and bandages with them, so Rinko and Hinako head downstairs to find some. However, Hinako sees the doll again, this time warning her about Rinko. Rinko then appears to push Hinako down the stairs, causing her to pass out. Hinako wakes up in the dark shrine again from exactly where she left off before, and moving on she sees Fox Mask in the distance, but he disappears behind a door. She finds another warning in this area, this time telling her not to believe the fox's words or to trust him. Getting to the door, she is once again in need of a key to open it. On the way to find it, she hears the voice of Sakuko calling out to her. She finds the key, and after another chase while hearing Sakuko's voice, she heads through the door. Heading through the next set of doors, she approaches a figure kneeling on the bridge. It stands and turns around and it's something horrifying, but it seems to resemble and have the voice of Sakuko. This monster says that she's there to save Hinako, and Hinako is forced to fight. Eventually the fight ends with Hinako being saved and approached by Fox Mask, who banishes the monster. Fox Mask refers to it as an evil spirit or an impurity that will no longer haunt Hinako. After this, Fox Mask leads her to another part of the shrine and says that in order to proceed further, they need to cleanse themselves in preparation for the sacred ground that lies before them. Leading her over to a basin filled with water, Fox Mask drinks some and offers Hinako the chance to do the same. She looks though, and the water has now become lava, but Fox Mask assures her that it's water. She drinks it though and she's been tricked. It is lava and it burns her, but why did Fox Mask trick her? She sees the doll from her childhood once again, telling her not to trust the Fox Mask, and Hinako once again passes out and wakes up back in Ebisugaoka. Rinko states that Hinako fell down the stairs. Hinako is fine and unhurt, so they leave the house and head back towards the town to make their way to Shu's house. In the town again, they spot the large monster. Dealing with it or simply running from it, they make their way through the many monsters there and eventually arrive at Ebisugaoka Middle School. Bizarrely, Hinako overhears a conversation in which Rinko is telling Shu that Hinako is dead and that Shu needs to snap back to reality. Anyway, the gate there is locked, so they are not currently able to pass through it and into the mountains where Shu's house is. So they head into the school. Shu and Rinko stay in one of the classrooms and Hinako goes off in search of a key for the gate. The growths in the town have reached the school too, but after a long search and many clues as to where the key may be, Hinako obtains it. During her time there in the school, she hears her sister there.
Hinako はお友達といつまでも一緒にいたい。お姉ちゃん、どこ？お友達は永遠じゃないのよ。彼らだっていつか必ずあなたを裏切る。あなたが裏切り者と呼ばれたように。お姉ちゃん。天秤にかける価値があるかどうか。しっかりと判断しなさい。それってどういう？
Returning to Shu and Rinko, they tell Hinako that they'll keep watch and that she should get some rest. So she quickly falls asleep but finds herself instantly back at the dark shrine again. Like last time, she wakes up at the exact moment she had passed out before, and Fox Mask is there, telling her that she'd saved his life, and that by doing so she'd laid claim to his soul, and that he will now save hers by claiming the life of her old self. Getting up, Hinako passes into another new area of the Dark Shrine. Heading towards Fox Mask again, he disappears, saying that he's going to make arrangements, and that Hinako needs to bid her farewells. In this area, which is crawling with monsters, Hinako first finds Sakuko there. She's been locked in a cage. After solving a puzzle, Hinako grabs a key and leaves the room, thereby condemning Sakuko to the darkness. Next, on the other side of the area, Hinako finds Rinko there in a cage herself, suspended above a pit of lava. She needs 3 emblems. Here, there are representations of areas in Rinko's life, such as the school and the Chizuria store. Finding the 3 emblems, Hinako places them into a contraption, and grabbing the key, this sends Rinko into the lava pit, killing her. That's 2 friends cut off, 1 more left. Using the new key, Hinako opens another door, and this is a room that features 6 plinths. She hears the voice of Shu. She needs to find 2 items of great value to Shu and place them on the plinths. Finding these items, the door opens and Hinako approaches Shu, who is hanging from the ceiling. He tells her that he'll respect her choice, and then he dies, and Hinako leaves. Reunited with Fox Mask again and having her bid farewell to her childhood friends, Hinako seems content with what she's done. Moving forward, Hinako experiences more pain, and she passes out again. Hinako wakes up in the school after her rest. Going outside, the gate is unlocked and Shu and Rinko are no longer there. Hinako leaves to catch up with them, but she is chased by the fog monster. Managing to evade it, she moves up the mountain, all the while being stalked by monsters. After fighting the monsters, and after another chase by the fog monster, Hinako arrives at Shu's house. Entering his house, Hinako hears someone outside, and opening the door as she thinks it's Shu and Rinko, she is grabbed by the fog monster and injured. She passes out and wakes up in the Dark Shrine. She's walking down the stairs with Fox Mask, and he warns her that the path ahead of them is one of great pain and suffering. Again, she sees the doll from her childhood, telling her to run and that there's no going back. Making her way through the area, she comes to a large ritual chamber, and a ritual is to be carried out. A silver wolf's arm is presented to Hinako. She then proceeds to cut her own arm off, and the wolf's arm is attached to her in its place, and Fox Mask tells her that he's proud of her. Moving on to the next altar, Hinako undergoes the second ritual. A red-hot brand is brought out, and Hinako's back is branded. In the third ritual chamber, she now has part of her face cut off, and over it, a fox mask is placed and it fuses itself to her. The ritual is now complete. Fox Mask tells Hinako that she's been very brave for the agony she's endured. The doll appears again, looking straight at them. Walking down along a hallway with Fox Mask, he says the others there are celebrating them. Entering into a large hall, they stand before the altar, and a priest stands before them. Hinako sees the doll again, telling her that she should remember her name, Shimizu Hinako. The priest, with a lava-filled burning face, then tries to attack Hinako. It speaks, and its voice is Rinko's. It says that she'll die and will be gone for good, just like she wants her to. Hinako starts to remember who she is and fights the monster, defeating it. And after this, Hinako starts to lose it again, but is calmed down by Fox Mask. Hinako seems to be having a battle within herself. She does succumb though, and is back in Ebisugaoka again. Answering a phone inside Shu's house, it's her mother. She's telling her to come home, and she freaks out as she hears Shu screaming on the other end of the phone. Junko approaches from the dark hallway, and he tells Hinako that time is running out, asking her how much longer she'll stay there. Junko is wearing a mask, and her skin is grey, almost as if she's dead. She reminds Hinako of something she's told her many times, that she must decide her future, and that the decision is hers alone, telling her that she can't think about it forever. Making her way back down the mountain towards the family home. Back in the town, it appears that the flowers have taken over the majority of it now. Back at home, Hinako enters, and it's not the home that she remembers, as the halls and doors have changed. The phone rings, and picking it up, it's a strange call from the fishery. But pressing on, Hinako needs to find 3 emblems. So, solving a multitude of puzzles within the house, and confronting traumatic memories involving her tumultuous home life, she gains access to a room which is her own room. She sees another memory. Her mother is telling her that Shu is on the phone, but she does not want to talk to him. She leaves the room.
で自分がわからない感じ。自分の気持ちが自分で理解できない。どういうこと？何の話をしているの？多分あなたは私で私はあなたじゃない、そういう気がするの。あなたは誰？私がひなこならあなたは誰なの？あ、ひなこなのは同じ。でも心はもう清水ひなこじゃないのかもしれない。わけのわからない言い方はやめて。何の話をしているの？あんたこそとぼけるのはやめて。さっきからなんで何もわからないふりをしているの？ねえ、しっかりと私と向き合って、ちゃんと考えて。私はね、あんたをすぐに殺すこともできたんだよ。でもしなかった。なんでかわかる？ちゃんとあんたと清水ひな子と本気で話がしたかったから。私たちは対等に、そして全力で殺し合わなくちゃいけない。なのにあんたは逃げ回るだけ。それどころか真剣に私たちのことを考えようともしていない。これ以上あんたが逃げ回るならもういい。もう今度こそあんたを殺すから。あんただけじゃないからね。お父さんもお母さんも殺す。この家もこの町も消し去ってやる。凛子も咲子も殺す。そしてもちろんあんたの大切な相棒もね。シュはどこにいるの？ねえ、シュってそんなに大事？あんたのこと未だに宇宙戦争ごっこの相棒だと思ってるんだよ。あんたのこと女だとさえ思ってくれてないんだよ。ただの幼なじみの腐れ縁。死んだって全然問題ない。シュは大切な私の相棒だ。殺されてたまるか。
After this, Hinako heads through a door behind which she'd heard Shu's voice earlier on. It's another representation of the house, but walking through another door, she sees her 3 friends there dead, exactly how they died in the dark shrine. She also sees her parents. A lot of rotting food is there on the table. Her father is drunk and her mother is just sat there smiling. He picks up a large knife and she has a flashback to a time when he threw a knife towards her. He then transforms into one of the large creatures she'd fought before. She then fights her father and mother, and during the fight they talk about how Hinako should start acting like a woman, and her mother says they don't have a choice, and that it's the role of a woman in society to just get married. Her mother has her spine missing, which is a reflection of her never standing up to her husband, but inflicting enough damage on them they eventually leave. Following them outside, they are standing before a massive figure with no face, dressed in a wedding kimono, and the figure grabs them, killing them. Hinako collapses once again and she is now back at the dark shrine. Drinking something that Fox Mask gives to her to ease her pain, he explains that it's a mix of rice and water, and that it's offered to ancestral spirits. A divine power is within it. Getting up, Fox Mask gives her a brooch adorned with the image of a fox. He says this is proof that she is his. After finding more emblems in order to proceed further into the shrine, Hinako speaks with Junko. She asks if Hinako killed it. She is referring to the other part of herself, the one that doesn't want to get married. She says that if not, then she'll kill it herself. After this conversation, Hinako passes through to another room with a strange contraption and takes Fox Mask's hand. He presents her with a ring and they place both the rings into the device. A door opens and Fox Mask says that all will soon be complete. In Ebisugaoka, Hinako sees the remains of her deceased parents and wants revenge. She picks up her weapon and goes after the fog monster called the Shiramuku, killing any monsters in her way. Eventually, her head starts to hurt and she is confronted by the Shiramuku, which grabs Hinako and Junko shows up, telling Hinako that she's been incredibly rude. She tells the monster to kill Hinako and it crushes her, killing her. Slightly before this, back in the dark shrine, the other Hinako proceeded into the worship hall and approached Fox Mask. Approaching the altar, 2 people walked in and presented them with offerings to place on the altar. Something happened to Hinako and she seemed to have the red flowers growing out of her body until she was completely covered in them. She then transformed into the large faceless figure, and this reveals that the figure, the Shuramuku, was the other part of Hinako. Back in the present, Junko tells her to say her farewells and that she hopes she finds happiness. Hinako then makes her way back to the family home, where she sees her parents outside. Her father refuses to look at her and tells her tearfully that this is no longer home to her and that she shouldn't be expected to be let inside. She then, revealed to be the Shuramuku, bows to her parents and kills them, whilst the other Hinako screams. She then, quite bizarrely, finds herself at the Dark Shrine. So we're now coming into the end game, so we'll now look at the different endings. For the game's first playthrough, players will get what I guess you could call the natural ending. Walking into the worship hall after witnessing the deaths of her parents at the hands of the other Hinako, she is confronted by Junko, who is surprised that Hinako is still clinging to life. Confused as to how Junko is on their side, Hinako starts to freak out, saying that this is a bad place, and taking some of the red capsules, Junko is concerned and asks what they are. Hinako says that they calm her down. Junko then appears to freeze in place, and Hinako smashes at the altar with the offerings on it. Masked Hinako, the Shuramuku, shows up, and furious that this Hinako killed her friends and her parents, the two fight one another. Defeating it, the Shuramuku fades away and more of the monsters arrive. Running out of the hall, Hinako finds herself drifting between the town and the Dark Shrine, hearing the voices of her father, Fox Mask, and her friends. Making it to the exit, she hears sirens, and the Shuramuku is there. A policeman's voice is heard over the radio, and it talks about many casualties. It also mentions a female suspect who is wearing a wedding dress being at large, and carrying a knife and a box of red capsules on the floor. This tells us that the wedding happened, and in her head she rejected it, snapped, and massacred people at her wedding. The game then ends. But that's not the end of the story, as consecutive playthroughs reveal more depth. Let's look at the second ending. In the second ending, titled Fox's Wedding, some things are different. For one, for the player at least, there's no longer any mystery around what Hinako is rebelling against, which is an arranged marriage. She also has the brooch she received from Fox Mask too, which gives her access to previously inaccessible areas. Hinako would also receive the wolf's arm much earlier. When leaving her room in the house when in pursuit of the second ending, this scene is different. It features Hinako telling the other one that she should just die, because if she dies, then she might be reborn as someone else. She says the good and the bad things in life only lead to despair. She should stop relying on her parents, otherwise she'll be left behind. She says that someone who is kind today might be a different person the next day. Using her father as an example, she says that her father used to smile and laugh once, but she says that running and succumbing to fear is not a decision. As in the previous run, her face comes off again and she disappears. For this ending, Hinako is not to take a single red capsule, as these were what led her to commit mass murder whilst under their influence. More on that in a minute, but she is also to obtain a certain item called Agura no Hote-sama. After the 3 rituals and by wearing the fox brooch, Hinako can gain access to another area of the Dark Shrine which houses a water puzzle. There she can find a bottle of the Agura no Hote-sama. There's more to this area, but that's something we'll save for the next ending. This elixir is a deep red colour, which actually takes me back to Silent Hill 1. Is this the same, or at least a similar substance as Aglaophotis? These two substances are both used to dispel evil spirits, so it's certainly plausible and a very cool link to the Silent Hill universe. Anyway, getting to the end of the game again, approaching Junko this time, she says that Hinako Shimizu no longer exists, and tells this Hinako to be gone. She says that she will take care of this. The doll from Hinako's childhood then appears on Junko's shoulder, and it looks straight at her. Turning round, Junko is gone, and smashing up the altar again, Hinako is confronted by the masked Hinako. The two come to blows and the Agura no Hote-sama falls to the floor. Fox Mask runs over to masked Hinako after the other one reanimates, and tells her to drink the elixir in the bottle. Doing so, Fox Mask says that she had been possessed by something foul, and he banishes the other Hinako from that place, telling his Hinako that she's now safe. Shu then shows up and hits Fox Mask with a bat, but as Shu attempts to hit him again, Hinako protects him. He says that he swore that he'd keep her safe, and asks why she doesn't trust him. She says that she wanted for them to be together, but they can't. He asks why she trusts this nobody, to which she replies that Fox Mask wants to build a future with her, whereas he, Shu, only wants things to stay the same. She wishes that she could split herself in two, as both of these things give her hope. That if there were two of her, then one could stay and the other could keep on being his partner. Shu walks off, and when she goes after him, we find out that Shu had been supplying Hinako with drugs, which were the red capsules, and these capsules were basically making Hinako reflect within herself. He was in love with her and couldn't bear the thought of her marrying someone that he thought she did not want to marry. So Shu is a skilled herbologist, and since Hinako was becoming quite addicted to over-the-counter painkillers, he was able to mix up a concoction of his own, and these helped Hinako's headaches, but as he just mentioned, these capsules also had a dark, sinister side effect to them. He researched something called hakukusu, which is a very rare herb that requires a specific environment to grow. It's also known as the flower of the gods. It can apparently give someone the ability to converse with gods and to visit their lands. This plant was thought to have been brought to Japan by a foreign missionary and was dubbed Kakura Makakura by the locals. In a note titled Clinical Trial, it appears Shu took it himself, and in his dreams he saw another version of himself that spoke to him. Near to Shu's house and by the pond are a load of white flowers. These could be the same plants used in White Claudia from Silent Hill Origins. Anyway, after his confession, something happens to Shu, and he is encased within a deity known as Tsukumogami. Fighting it and defeating it, Shu is released from Tsukumogami, and Foxmask approaches. Shu tells him that he's counting on him to keep Hinako safe, to which he replies that Hinako now belongs to him. Shu says that he's lending her to him for now, and Hinako rightly steps in and tells both of them to stop treating her like an object. Foxmask says that they're the only two people in the world who truly understand Hinako, and that perhaps they could become friends. Shu then reluctantly fist bumps Foxmask, and Hinako is revealed to actually be the Shiramuku. Afterwards, Foxmask and the Shiramuku are stood outside the shrine and head inside. In a dark end to things though, the face of Hinako is on the step, and she's screaming and crying that she does not want to end up like her mother, and someone stamps on her face. And this concludes the second ending. On a third playthrough of the game, at the Dark Shrine, Hinako can find one of Sakuko's diaries which mentions her having a dream about a very old sword, and one that was cursed as it is steeped in evil energy. She thinks that it may be the source of the corrupt god's power, but due to its divinity, it cannot be destroyed. The sword, however, can be purified. Perhaps it could be used in order to weaken the corrupt god. Shortly after leaving the house at the start of the playthrough, Hinako can find a research journal written by an explorer along with a photo. The journal says the sacred sword's animosity grew whilst buried under the earth. It says that a sacred barrier was erected around it using Jizo statues. It also says that by offering items to 5 Jizo statues relating to the 5 elements of wuxing, such as wood, fire, earth, metal and water, it may be possible to retrieve the sword. One by one, around Ebisugaoka, Hinako finds these statues and receives a vision of where the offering may be, finding the offering and offering it to the statue. Visiting the divine tree after this, Hinako can receive the sword, with the dark energy imbued in the blade. She can't purify the sword for this ending, so we'll park that for now until we discuss the game's fourth ending. During this playthrough at Shu's house, Hinako can also find a letter written to her from Shu, and it's essentially a goodbye as Hinako is to be married. The scene where she speaks with herself in the bedroom is now different too. She mentions that something feels off and that she thinks it might be love, though she does in fact feel something for Shu, but the other Hinako does not think so, leading to the other one saying that one of them must be right. She asks that if she's wrong to kill her, or she will have to kill the other Hinako, and then her face falls off and she disappears. Reaching Junko in the worship hall again, Hinako says that she has the right to exist. Junko says that she can do this, but Hinako says that it's her choice to decide. Touching Hinako, Junko freezes. The doll is now on Hinako's shoulder and it then disappears, and she proceeds to smash up the altar as she did in previous endings. The other Hinako shows up again, saying that she thought she'd killed her, and that she shouldn't dare try to interfere. Both of them claim that this is their decision to make. Masked Hinako says that she wants a new life. The other Hinako says that she has already decided that she wants masked Hinako gone, and to go back to being Hinako Shimizu. Face to face with masked Hinako, who remember is the Shuramuku, the two fight again, but this time their fight is interrupted by Foxmask. He says that this is not fitting behaviour for a bride-to-be. She demands to know who Foxmask is. He asks the same, saying that the Hinako he knows would never act this way, and he asks how she has managed to enter the sacred grounds. The doll appears, distracting him, and Shu attacks Foxmask. Hinako is delighted to see him, and he's happy she's speaking up and has decided to express her true feelings. Foxmask gets up and is disgusted that these two, he calls them filth, have crept into this place. Something is happening to him and he transforms into his true self. This form is the Shichibi, the 7-tailed fox. Hinako and Shu try to run for it, but Hinako is forced into a fight with the fox. Before they do so, he says that he is nothing more than a man that fell in love, and all he ever wanted was Hinako's love and happiness. He says that he will still make her his wife. They then fight, and gradually the fox's colour turns from a deep red to a golden yellow. At certain points, Fox Mask will regain his humanity and tell Hinako that he just wanted a better life for her. Eventually the fight comes to an end and the Shichibi yields. Nonetheless, he thanks Hinako for staying with him to the end. Hinako replies that despite everything she will not forget his kindness, and she thanks him. He tells them both to go and they leave. Afterwards, running from the shrine, they arrive back in Ebisugaoka. Catching their breath, Hinako thanks Shu for coming to help her. He says he does find it crazy that she thought the only way to find her courage was to give up on her life. Running through the town, they say something strange. Hinako says that Shu looks weird in a tie, and he replies that she looks weird in whatever she's wearing. But Shu is not wearing a tie. What does this mean? Well, it's possible that the wedding was set to happen, but that Hinako and Shu ran away together. A radio report states that geysers have resulted in an increase in toxic hydrogen sulfide gas in the town, and that residents have been evacuated. Just what has been unleashed on the town? Is this because of what happened in the Dark Shrine? That concludes the third ending. Now on to the fourth one. Considered to be the true ending, the fourth ending, Ebisugaoka in Silence, requires not taking any red capsules, obtaining the sacred sword, and to offer the fox brooch as an offering to a Jizo statue close to Hinako's home. This time with the sword though, it needs to be purified due to the dark energy that exists in its blade. To do this, Hinako needs to visit that hidden part of the Dark Shrine after the 3 rituals, and ring 3 bells, solving a water puzzle in which the water there turns to a deep red colour. Visiting a small shrine in the mountains, there's a basin there, identical to the one at the Dark Shrine, and the water is now turned into the same colour as in the Dark Shrine. This is the same liquid as in the bottle in the Agura no Hotai-sama. Submerging the sacred sword in it, this dark power is gone, and it's now just a normal katana. We can also find one of Sakuko's diaries in the Dark Shrine in which she writes that she was visited in her dreams by 2 different gods, both of which were telling her to do different things. One told her to restore the Senonsugi Shrine, the other one told her not to. She wished to restore the shrine anyway, so she went with that one. The one god said there was an evil deity who robbed them of their shrine, and the other then told her the shrine had been used to worship an evil being, leading to it becoming derelict and falling out of use. She chose one of the gods to put her trust in, but the other one was not happy. The diary entry was finished by the deity and called Sakuko foolish because she wished to serve a malevolent god. This playthrough also gave us more information about the doll. The doll was actually trying to control, or rather guide, Hinako to go against what Fox Mask was trying to do. In this run, the doll warns Hinako not to submit to the fox or it will curse her. And then at the Dark Shrine near the end, Hinako straight up asks the doll why it's trying to control her. In this run, we also find out more about Hinako's parents. Until now, she'd seen her mother as spineless, hence why the monster representation of them shows her without a spine. But on her journey around the warped Shimizu residence, she understands a bit more about Kimi, her mother. She learns that her mother does stand up to her father, and learns that when he's angry about her cooking and berating her for it, it's because she's purposely made his food taste bad as a punishment for shouting at her or getting drunk. She ignores him and he usually caves within 3 days. She also receives an apology from her father. This leads to a different take on this scene, as she realises that these are not her parents but are imposters instead. It's clear now that Hinako has a clearer mind, and finding her friends' diaries and notes written by them, they seem to be much less erratic as she speaks as though she has a purpose. She also seems to have better cohesion with the other part of herself, and this shows us that she's growing in confidence, accepts both parts of herself, and is in a much better place mentally to be able to make a decision, being more defined as she goes after the Shiramuku. Progressing to the endgame as normal, speaking with Junko this time, Hinako has a much better idea of what's happening. The gods vying for power. One of them wants to marry her off, and the other one wants to stop the wedding. There seems to be some sort of divine war going on here. They've been pitting both sides of Hinako against herself. She finally understands. This is a battle that they have to fight together. She says she's been a terrible daughter, but that if her loved ones want her to be happy, to let her do this, and she smashes at the altar, refusing to be a puppet. Masked Hinako walks in and shares other Hinako's sentiments. Why should they fight to the death just for one of them to survive the nightmare? However, the gods who are using them both as proxies for their war are not happy and force them to attack one another. Transported to a large open area, the 9-tailed fox, Kyubi, speaks through Fox Mask and says that once in a blue moon, Humanity produces an extraordinary girl blessed with divine power, through her blood, basically. It's revealed that Foxmask is under a spell, and has been ever since Hinako was born, putting in him a desire to seek out this extraordinary girl and to make her his wife. The Kyuubi calls the Foxmask an inexperienced failure. In the same way that Tsukumogami used the doll, the Kyuubi has kept Foxmask under this spell, and this is how he managed to get Hinako there. The Kyuubi seems to be finding all this very funny, and Hinako shouts at it to stop laughing. At the same time, masked Hinako is fighting the Kyuubi. The other Hinako is fighting the Tsukumogami, which has the doll at its centre this time, and they manage to defeat their puppeteers, if you like. Afterwards, the dark shrine starts to shake, and Foxmask runs in, helping them out of the hall. He apologises and says to leave this matter to him now. He realises what Hinako desires most of all, as he desires the same, and that is the time to know whether this love is real or because of a spell. He, like Hinako, needs time to find this out and to live his life. Hinako says that if the love for them was real, then she hopes they can meet again someday, and the three of them embrace one another. After they've left the dark shrine, they are back in Ebisugaoka. Sometime later, Foxmask, whose name is Kotoyuki, wrote them a letter telling them how he's trying to enjoy life and regain that part of his childhood that he'd lost. He says that he will reevaluate his feelings for Hinako. Walking through the town, they talk about how Kotoyuki grew to love someone deeply and did everything that he could for them. Hinako says that she wants to live a life full of passion like that, and even says that she may even end up proposing to Kotoyuki herself. The other Hinako says that she wants to pour her heart into something, but that she does not yet know what that will be. As they sit atop a torii gate, they look out across the town, and the game then ends. Alright, so they're the serious endings. There is one joke ending in step with that long-time Silent Hill tradition. This one is a UFO ending, but although I did obtain that ending, I'm not going to explain it because it's a non-canon ending. Let's now dive into different aspects of the lore in order to wrap this up and make more sense of the story. Let's begin by discussing the town. In terms of its history, Ebisugaoka was said to have been a hidden town that was a refuge for the defeated soldiers of the Taira clan during the Genpei War. However, this was never actually officially confirmed, but many of the villagers believed it to be true. It's said that the sword of the deceased leader of the clan was buried at the base of a great tree that protected the land, and of course, this was the sword that Hinako found after giving various offerings. Ebisugaoka, like many parts of Japan since it's located on the Pacific Rim of Fire, is prone to lots of natural disasters, and in 1945 the town experienced geysers, which resulted in 30-foot jets of water, but this also resulted in lots of noise along with hydrogen sulfide gas. This resulted in residents suffering from skin sores that they claim had been caused by the gas, and arsenic had been discovered in the water that came from the geyser. It's said that an 8-headed dragon had once demanded the sacrifice of beautiful young girls to devour. This dragon ended up being slain, with its 8 heads being cut off, and one of them came back to life as a poisonous water dragon that plagued the land. Some believe that the toxic gas was a result of this dragon. This also explains what happened in the third ending, with the radio report indicating that this toxic gas had once again become a problem. Earthquakes are also a problem in Ebisugaoka too, with predictions that many more earthquakes could hit the town in the future, leading to rumours amongst the town's religious residents of a curse upon the town. The town also had disappearances. Bodies would show up in the village, and autopsies were baffling doctors, with these bodies having an unclear cause of death, and that the cranium of the bodies were filled with insect eggs, and these bodies were then handed over to the police, who, it's reported, got rid of the bodies in secret. In terms of healthcare and treatment, the town's doctors had a tradition of using cloudy rice wine, known as doboroku, to treat various ailments. Doboroku is more commonly known as sake. The doctors in the town would get frustrated too, over elderly residents preferring to try herbal remedies, and they would end up going to the doctor too late, after those remedies didn't work. But finally onto the school. Ebisugaoka Middle School was founded by Mr. Yoneda. He had purchased the land and spent every yen he had on the town, which was his hometown, and this included the construction of the school too. Mr. Yoneda was of the belief that he was blessed in his life by way of the Inari, the fox, and this was after he had helped an injured fox and cared for it. Therefore, he installed a small shrine on the school grounds by way of thanks. Right, so let's look at Hinako's home life. As explained already, Hinako was the younger of 2 daughters, with the other being named Junko. The parents were named Kanta and Kimi. Hinako used to play with the boys and not the girls, which many children in the town considered strange, and this would upset her and she would be made fun of. Shortly after this, she met Shu, and they became close friends. Like a lot of marriages in Japan at this time, the parents' marriage was arranged too. Both of them seem to be from the town itself, as during one of the playthroughs we can find a note which is written by Kimi, which talks about her moving out of her parents' home after her marriage to Kanta. It's thought that from finding notes in the game, Kimi had some stomach problems, and these problems were being treated by using herbal remedies. As for Kanta, as we'd learned from Kimi, he'd attempted to start his own restaurant, but their venture failed, resulting in Kanta racking up large debts after his business partner and friend ran off with all their money. What's more is that Kimi is sick and needs an operation. Kanta's brother would write to him, telling him that their own mother actually got worse after surgery and that it's not worth getting into even more debt. He would drink a lot, and this resulted in him becoming violent. Kimi would write to her friend talking about how violent her husband would get. Eventually, Kanta effectively arranged to marry off Hinako to pay his debts, and we can find a receipt from someone that was owed money, indicating that his debts had been paid off thanks to this. Hinako hated her father, and she wasn't the biggest fan of her mother either. Most of Hinako's impressions about her father were based on the way he acted, and as we saw in the third run-through of the game, she was able to come to understand her father a bit better, as with her mother too. Hinako was determined not to follow the path that her mother did. During this scene, her father tearfully tells her that he just wanted her to be happy and secure, and that he doesn't mind if she doesn't want to get married, as the choice is ultimately hers. He even says that he would be happy if she married Shu. She noted that she sympathises with him after learning this about him, but she says it still doesn't excuse his behaviour. During her childhood, Hinako would always feel that there were two of herself, living in the same body, left Hinako and right Hinako. We can see this by looking at a drawing on the wall in the house. This is a crucial detail when it comes to analysing the game's events. When she told Shu that she was going ahead with the marriage, he told her she isn't thinking clearly. He told her that she should calm down and listen to her inner self. This was after Shu himself had undertaken a clinical trial on himself with the red capsules, and he had a little chat with his other self. Problem is, of course, there were two Hinakos both pulling in different directions. Ebisugaoka has a pretty warped history when it comes to the primary faith being practiced in the town, because notes found indicate that they had faith in the water dragon and then faith in a divine tree too, after a very tall monk had led them to a great cedar tree. He told the residents that they should devote themselves to this tree and it will keep the beast, or the dragon, subdued forever. This resulted in a new faith. They then transitioned to a faith called Tsukumogami, in which old tools would be brought to the hollowed out tree and would be offered up to the gods, as they believed after 100 years objects developed souls. This included the sacred sword. It was offered up at the tree and it ended up with a dark energy attached to it. Anyway, this faith didn't last long either, as the divine tree would be struck by lightning and then people turned their worship to one of the primary Shinto deities, Inari. So let's talk about Inari and also the foxes. Now, in Japanese culture, the fox is a supernatural being with mystical abilities, such as the power of shape-shifting and illusion. They serve as messengers or also guardians of shrines that are dedicated to Inari. The fox's age and power is noted by the number of tails they possess, and the nine-tailed fox is thought to be one of the most powerful. Some local doctors believed that a lot of the town's younger generation prayed to Inari in the hope of soothing their pain and to speed up healing. Children in Ebisugaoka were taught to respect the foxes and not to provoke or chase them, but this was not due to any spiritual reason, but because they potentially carry rabies. But this leads us on to fox possession. One of the doctors wrote about how he has heard tales of those who blaspheme against the Inari faith being possessed by the fox. Soon after, he would follow this up by stating that his assumption of fox possession being a curse was in fact inaccurate. He discovered tales of situations such as a housewife offering a starving fox food and being possessed by the fox, which led her to some hidden treasure, and another of a shaman being shown a future of a coming famine, allowing locals to prepare properly for it. The fox, however, amongst the younger generation at least, was seen as something negative, but one must be careful not to invoke the ill will of Inari. A farmer tells a story of something that happened during the war, where some military policemen got drunk and kicked over a statue of Inari, going so far as to spit on it. The following day, the military policemen involved were found dead in the waterway. An autopsy was carried out and their bodies were filled with decaying animal carcasses. In the school, we can find a notice which states that a certain practice was being carried out at the school called the Fox's Sacrifice. This practice was banned by the school, and according to a note by Sakuko, it involved writing some names on a blackboard and the fox will tell them their futures, with one of them being granted good luck. By the list, we can see that everyone's predicted or destined deaths had pretty much been in line with how they appear on the blackboard, with Shu suffocating, Rinko being burned alive, and Kimi, Hinako's mum, dying from cancer. Sakuko believed in the spiritual power of this game, pleading with people not to play it, as she believed the fox was actually deciding their futures and not merely foretelling them. It was a very dangerous game to play. Something known as a fox wedding was also a common expression in the town. It would be used when it was raining the same time as the sun was shining. It was also used by way of an expression when a young girl had been spirited away by a fox. Lastly, it does seem from the game that both faiths of Tsukumogami and Inari had somehow fused together, and as we saw in the endings, the Tsukumogami and the Kyuubi were vying for power and used Hinako as a proxy to wage war against each other, I'd guess, with the both of them guiding one half of Hinako each. As I mentioned earlier, I do believe that the Tsukumogami deity was using the doll to guide Hinako, and was by extension using Shu for this purpose too, which is why he's at the centre of the Tsukumogami during the fox's wedding ending. Now, who is the Fox Mask? Well, he's a boy from Hinako's childhood. When walking through the town at the end of the game, she has to pass through a playground. She recalls a memory of her saving a young boy from being attacked by a fox, a memory that she'd completely forgotten about. This boy is called Kotoyuki Fujitori. This is the boy who would go on to be Fox Mask. After he was bitten, the doctor checked Kotoyuki out and stated that the fox left a wound just below the left eye of the young boy, and during treatment he collapsed with a fever, being transported to the hospital where he was considered fine by the doctors, returning home the following day. His mother, though, would insist that her son was now different, not himself. One thing that needs to be noted was that after he'd regained consciousness, a doctor called his name and he simply replied, "So that is my name." This was an early indication that he had been possessed, something that the doctor considered too. During Hinako's descent of the mountain on a shrine, we can find a letter written by someone described only as a strict mother. She says that her son, to whom the letter is addressed, has noble blood, and that he should be careful who he plays with. At some point, Kotoyuki was to move away. His mother said that she'd notified his teachers, and the move appeared to be very sudden. Kotoyuki would write a letter to Hinako, in which he'd tell her that he'll never forget her, and he thanked her for saving him. He would devote himself to his studies and learning about etiquette, and this was about making himself the perfect match for Hinako, as it was his wish to make her his wife. But at this point, remember, he'd already been spellbound by the Kyuubi. But let's divert and talk about the Tsuneki family. It is related, I promise. A housemaid would write about how a marriage had been arranged by the Tsuneki clan's young heir and a noblewoman. This young heir had to break off all the relationships he was having with other women. One of these women, a maid, had ended up pregnant. The young heir and this maid planned to run away together, but the moment this other marriage had been arranged, the young heir discarded this maid and the Tsuneki family had her kicked out. It said that she cried so hard that she cried blood. The maid was Kotoyuki's mother, Sachi. Kotoyuki is the child of the young heir of the Tsuneki family. The Tsuneki themselves were very rich and had a unique talent for business, utilizing this talent during times of unrest in order to make an incredible amount of money. In the library in the Dark Shrine, we can find a note from a housemaid which talks about the family being cursed, and that she must tell her master, as she herself feared the curse falling upon her. Another note from her states that the Tsuneki child, Kotoyuki, would at some point exact his revenge once there is turmoil within the Tsuneki family. Well, this turmoil had arrived. We can find out from various notes written by the Tsuneki's family physician that on February 1st of an unknown year, some of the family started to get sick. The physician considered that this may be a cold, but the symptoms did not improve, they actually got worse. A week later, on February 8th, more symptoms were showing up, and these patients were suffering from laboured breathing, quadriplegia, and involuntary movements. Their facial features seemed to be deforming too. 2 days later, the patients were reported to be making strange sounds, and they would get down onto all fours and crawl around. Perhaps this is where these creatures come from. The housemaids were starting to whisper about fox possession, but the physician quickly shut this talk down. He instead was ordered by the family to keep this quiet, and the physician's request for them to be hospitalized was denied. Another 3 days later, on February 13th, the young heir and his wife had passed away. Their skin was covered in sores and they smelled very bad. Autopsy requests were denied and the bodies were cremated. The eldest son then died and the two daughters were experiencing symptoms too, with them being expected to die very, very soon. However, 3 days later, from February 16th to the 18th, the physician writes of a miracle, that the daughter's symptoms had improved dramatically, and by the 18th, they'd made a full recovery. The physician then writes about the housemaids speaking about a curse. But back to Kotoyuki. He was informed by his mother that his real last name was Tsuneki, and that he had his father's noble blood running through his veins. One cool point about the name Tsuneki is that it's an anagram of Kitsune, which is a fox spirit. But anyway, after Kotayuki's father, the young heir who had gone on to rule the family, had died along with his wife, the grandfather of the Tsuneki family had invited Kotayuki to become the family's successor, so Kotayuki accepted. He would, under the spell of course, get to work in making Hinako his wife, and this started with his proposal of marriage to Hinako's father. We can find a letter which outlines his obsession with her, and it says that he forbids anyone from laying a finger on her and that Hinako is his. He and Hinako would write to one another, and she'd sent him a letter with a pressed flower inside it, and in the letter she talks about how she hates being forced to live as a proper girl. He would write back thanking her for the flower, and would also write to her telling her that she should spread her wings and fly. One day when she was visiting, he found the letters that Hinako had received from Kotayuki, and she caught him looking at them. So Kotayuki had a duty to follow the mandate of the Tsuneki clan, wherein a living sacrifice was to be offered every 8 years, as this would quell the wrath which lived in the depths, and this is the aforementioned curse that befell the previous generation. They needed a maiden, pure of heart, and with blood that had been blessed by the stars. This duty to find this sacrifice would fall upon the head of the house, and in doing so the thirst of the being would be quenched. Her blood was to be drained and added to wine that had been distilled 8 times. Her body was to be filled with rice mixed with the master's saliva, and then sewn shut with a needle and thread. A naginata and a long type of sword or spear would be gifted by the Tsuneki head to his new wife on their wedding day, which is why Hinako received it. In pursuit of the 4th ending, Hinako discovers that they just want her so their clan can prosper. One girl who had also been spirited away at some point, I'm guessing 8 years beforehand, was a girl named Mayumi. When first visiting the Dark Shrine entry point, we can find a message from her to her parents, and it says that she doesn't think she'll make it home. In one of the notes she left behind on Hirogami, which is an act of a relationship or marriage between a mortal and a divine being, she mentions that she was one of these whose blood had been blessed by the stars. I mean, she took this to mean that her blood was simply a rare mutation, as in blood other than the A, B or O blood types. She thinks that the practice of Hirogami in this case serves to strengthen the bonds between mortals and gods. She wonders who will be next to enter into that world and says that she'll do everything in her power to help them transition to a new life. This next person, of course, would be Hinako. Kotayuki had gone to Kanto and Kimi with a proposition to marry Hinako, and since Kotayuki was from an extremely wealthy family, they agreed, and Kanto got excited since they'd be able to pay their debts and travel to different places. Finally, as we saw in the Fox Wets Its Tail ending, Kotayuki was confirmed to have been turned into a divine being, possessed by the fox as he turned into the Shichibi. He says during their brief conversation in this form that out of love and respect for Hinako, he respected the traditions and rules of human courtship. It's not until the 4th ending that the spell is revealed. A note again from the library mentions something called Enmi Jogon Roku, which is a spell used to have one's romantic desires fulfilled. It was, however, expressly forbidden back in 757 AD, but these spells were adopted into the practice of Onmyodo, which uses astronomy and calendars. It was ultimately banned in 1870 though, as it was a superstition. Is this how the Kyuubi had, through Kotayuki, managed to ensnare Hinako? It's very likely. So the Dark Shrine is this game's version of the Otherworld. Instead of being old, dark and rusty, the Dark Shrine world is still dark but pristine, and it is, as the name suggests, a very large shrine, and I could guess that you could say is real, but that it exists in parallel to the real world. Judging from the many notes and prayers scratched onto rocks along with pictures of young women there, many had come through here before Hinako did. Some of the notes are of these young women apologising to their parents for being a horrible daughter, and that they thought they were getting what they deserved. It's clear that these young women had been spirited away at some point, which explains all the missing persons cases, and this is perhaps linked to the 8-year sacrifices that were required by the clan. At one point, Kotayuki tells Hinako that the door leading into the Dark Shrine is one that denies all but a select few entry into its sacred grounds. I'd guess that many who passed through the entryway into the area weren't granted access and perished, or got consumed by monsters. It seems that similar to other Silent Hill games, the protagonist is being forced to go through representations of other people's psyches, with Sakuko's bedroom, Rinko's bedroom and the town store all being areas that Hinako has to go through. And this leads us on to the question of what was real and what was not. In keeping with the theme of some of the Silent Hill games, the game explored the psyche of the protagonist. Whereas other games in the series' sub-focus was guilt, shame and feelings that came from repressed memories, this one seemed to focus on Hinako's resentment when it came to the expectation to conform to what were Japanese cultural traditions. The first ending was Hinako rejecting the marriage in her head, and after she snapped, she subsequently killed all the guests at the wedding in a murder spree. The second was her accepting the marriage to Kotayuki. The third was her rejecting the marriage, but she was not under the influence of the red capsules, and she escaped the shrine but was never really free. And the fourth and final real ending was both sides of Hinako being free to make their own decision in their own time. I guess you could say what she went through was her own personal hell, but what was actually real? Well, the lines between the two are blurred somewhat. There are a couple of things that throw us off, such as Rinko stating to Shu that Hinako is actually dead. So, is she dead? Rinko is telling Shu that Hinako is gone or dead because in the real world she had gone missing, or she's referring to the fact that Hinako has decided to get married, so therefore she is no longer Shimizu Hinako. Hinako had been spirited away. As explained, she was one of the aforementioned chosen girls with her special or honoured blood. That's why she was allowed into the Dark Shrine just as the other missing girl Mayumi was. On the first playthrough at least, Hinako can find random radios in the town, and these are the memories of conversations that she'd heard in her life, such as her father berating her mother, and her father's behaviour is a large part of how she sees marriage. We can find letters written by Hinako's mother that speak of how violent and aggressive Kanto, who is Hinako's father, would get. These are here again because of Hinako's idea of what her own marriage would be like. The scarecrow school children in the foggy field were from the rumours of a local legend about a scarecrow monster known as Akayakashi that would chase anyone that gazes upon it for too long and kill them. The field itself was another of Hinako's memories, and she reveals that she and Shu used to play there as kids, and one time she got lost there, and she writes here about how she feels like the field spread out endlessly into the horizon. What about the flowers and the shiramuku? Shiramuku is a white kimono wedding dress used in Shinto weddings. I've seen this in another game set in Japan, which was Ghostwire Tokyo, in which these visitors would appear in the city as a manifestation of envy and resentment. The flowers in the town perhaps represent the passage of time. The more flowers in the town, the more time it is that Hinako has taken to decide what she wants. Hinako is required to confront her reality, but let's look at Hinako's friends, starting with Sakuko. Sakuko was a girl that was different to others. In school she was frequently picked on and was laughed at by others. She dreaded both school and gym class, as an example, as she would be mocked when trying to do sports. In a letter to Sakuko written to her by her mother, she states that she shouldn't tell others that she hears voices talking to her or singing. Her mother attributes it to puberty as the reason she is hearing these strange things, and that she experienced the same thing herself when she was young. But this of course were the deities visiting her and speaking to her in her dreams. Sakuko's mother says that if she tells people about these voices, her friends will think she is the strange girl and they will ostracize her. Anyway, after finding the key to Sakuko's mailbox, Hinako can search it and she finds a report in there indicating that Sakuko has mild autism. Although in 1960s Japan this was seen at the time as an intellectual disability, and wasn't directly termed as autism, but was instead termed as a severe moving disability. In a letter to Sakuko's teacher, Sakuko's mother seems to be apologising for something that happened on a school trip, citing her daughter's fear of the dark, and attributed this to her sleeping in a different environment than usual. Sakuko's mother refuses to understand why her daughter is acting this way, and seems a lot more distraught at the possibility of her own reputation potentially being damaged by her daughter. Sakuko's fear of the dark was shown in the Dark Shrine, by way of Hinako having to shut Sakuko in a dark room as a way of her cutting off her friends. We find journals written by Sakuko in the Dark Shrine, which showed us that Hinako was cold and fake towards her, but this was likely not the case, as this was that part of Hinako trying to cut off her friends. As for why she was calling Hinako a traitor, well, this just comes down to her feeling betrayed in terms of their friendship. Sakuko thought they'd end up doing everything together, but when Hinako started to move on in life, Sakuko thought she was being left behind. One interesting thing to finish on when it comes to Sakuko is that she herself may have been earmarked as someone who also had honourable blood. She is said to have been from the Igarashi clan, the last descendants and holders of the honourable blood. But make of that what you will. On to Rinko. We learned from our time in the Dark Shrine that Rinko was the class president at school, and from the looks of it she actually cared about others. And at one point, for another letter we find within the Dark Shrine, Rinko once considered Hinako her best friend. Although they did have a few arguments which resulted in them not speaking to each other for a good few weeks. In the school, Hinako can pick up and find origami on which were written words about Hinako, and not very nice ones either. They speak about her being a tomboy and not acting like a girl, despite her being much cuter than everyone else. Others state that someone wishes Hinako was dead, or that she'd be abducted. This is because, as is also obvious, and because she told Hinako about this, Rinko had a thing for Shu. but Shu did not like Rinko back, not in that way, because he of course loved Hinako instead. Rinko would try to pluck up the courage to ask Shu out, but never did so. It's not clear just how twisted up Rinko became towards Hinako as a result of this, or even if she did at all, but she at one point did try to write a letter to Hinako asking her to keep her distance from Shu. We are led to believe that she was evil early on and had pushed Hinako down the stairs, but we never see her push her down. It seems that Hinako simply lost her footing whilst turning around to look at Rinko. We also find notes in the Dark Shrine that make it seem like Rinko was bitter towards Hinako, such was her obsession with Shu. But like I said just now, I think this was Hinako's method of being able to cut off her friends by imagining that they hate her, making this decision a bit easier. A good point to support this is that in the store, after flipping the light, this note in which Rinko seemed to show compassion towards Hinako is how she actually acted, whereas this note in the darker version of the store changes to become more erratic. After the rituals, we see Rinko portrayed as the priest, but she's there because one side of Hinako is fighting back against the one that wants to marry Kotoyuki. As for Shu, as mentioned earlier, he and Hinako were very close growing up, and he would never treat her like a girl as she didn't like it, so he saw her as his partner. This is what they would call each other during their time playing Space Wars. Shu drew a picture of Hinako and gifted it to her. On the picture, found in the Dark Shrine, it had writing or curses on it, but these curses would not have been on the original one that Hinako got from him. She's imagining this up to make it easier to sever the connection between her and her friends. Shu telling Hinako that he'll accept her decision is once again a memory of Shu telling her he'll respect her decision in terms of her getting married. As for how Junko was portrayed, it seems that she was kind of on the parents' side, as she too had gotten married in a marriage arranged by her parents, and she saw it as necessary in line with Japanese custom. Prior to her own marriage, she does try to tell Hinako that marriage isn't all that bad. This is why she is seen throughout the game telling Hinako that she needs to let her friends go, and that they'll betray her. This particular scene changes in New Game Plus, as it sees Junko telling Hinako that she needs to start getting ready, and that Hinako is going to kill her friends with her own hands. When in the house here, she pretty much says that Hinako needs to choose to kill or be killed, and that she should choose death. She reveals that she went through the same thing that Hinako is being forced to go through, and she killed everyone. In the Dark Shrine, when walking down the corridor, Junko is there with who I'd assume is her husband on the other side, no doubt a reminder that Hinako should get married. It's not clear what happened to Junko in reality. She appeared to be decaying and had marks around her neck. This could indicate that she unalived herself, which would give weight to why she is portrayed the way she is in the game. Her name is also not on the board in the Fox's Sacrifice game, as she's already dead in the real world. It could explain why in the fourth ending we see the bell Hinako gave Junko hanging on a tree, almost like she hung it there as a tribute to her deceased sister. But again, that's just a theory. But that's it for the story of Silent Hill F. A very confusing one with a lot open to interpretation, but the core story does get clearer if you replay the game. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and subscribe if you aren't already. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, but for now, take care and I'll see you in the next one.